In my last video, I talked about transitioning from winter to spring. Now that we have arrived at spring and the mornings feel more bearable, I wanted to share a spring edition of one of my favorite breakfasts, semolina porridge, also known as soji. This dish is very special to me because it's a porridge that doesn't feel like a porridge. When I was a child, I hated porridge and refused to eat it, claiming it was too spicy for me. Apparently, my 3-year-old self thought this was the only logical reasoning I could give that would get me out of eating porridge. To get me to eat my porridge, my mom would cook it in a specific way to make it cut like a cake and then top it off with sprinkles. So I felt like I was eating cake for breakfast. Till today, I only eat my soji like a slice of cake. It reminds me of the ways my mom always tried to understand things from my perspective, no matter how young I was, and strive to love me the way I wanted to be loved. Soji, also known as semolina, is a flour that looks similar to cornmeal used for savory and sweet dishes. Today we're going to use it to make a sweet breakfast porridge. As I walk through the recipe, I'm going to be sharing certain sensory cues to pay attention to while cooking. My mom always taught me to cook with my senses: sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, and common sense. I think it's a really intuitive way to build your skills as a cook. It has transformed my own cooking journey, and I hope it helps you too. When making soji, I usually flavor it with ghee, cardamom, and saffron, and then top it off with pistachios. Yes, I have upgraded over the years from sprinkles. But today I thought I'd experiment with some new flavors just to demonstrate how versatile this porridge can be. To fit our spring season, I decided to flavor the soji today with rose and lemon. I started by dry roasting a 1/3 cup of soji over medium heat. My grandma actually dry roasts a big batch of soji and then stores the roasted soji in a jar, so she doesn't have to roast it every time she cooks with it. Roasting the soji helps it separate, which allows for a grainier texture. If you would prefer a mushier texture for your porridge, you can just skip this part. I also added some spices at this time. I'm sticking with my usual cardamom because it complements the rose flavor really well. I usually would have ground it in my mortar and pestle, but that broke, so I just cracked open 4 cardamom pods and added them whole. I stirred the soji and spices together every minute or so, and in between I rested my spoon on this beautiful ceramic sunflower spoon rest my mom painted. While my soji roasted, I grated the rind of a lemon. I was going to use the lemon juice for a dish later on, so I made sure to roll the lemon on my cutting board before grating to warm and soften it, because this helps release more juice. I grated the yellow parts of my lemon rind, making sure not to grate too deep because the white parts tend to be bitter. I don't have a microplane, but feel free to use that if you prefer. Once the soji starts to brown and smell roasted, or once you start to see wisps of smoke form on the pan, your soji is ready. This roasting process shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. I then added some ghee to my soji and stirred it until it fully incorporated into the soji. and the soji looked like coarse sand. At this time, I usually add a third cup of sugar, but I decided not to today because the rose syrup I was going to use later was pretty sweet. I then added in 1 cup of milk and stirred until most of the lumps of soji had disappeared. This should take a minute or 2. Finally, I added 1 tablespoon of rose syrup and stirred it up. I taste tested and then felt like I wanted a stronger rose flavor, so I added another tablespoon. This also made the soji a delightfully pink color. Around this time, you will probably notice that the porridge has combined really well and is now a lot thicker. That's when it's time to cover the pan with a lid. Once I started to see and hear the porridge bubbling, I reduced the heat to low and let it steam for 5 to 7 minutes. This steaming process is what allows the soji to bind together and cut like a cake. When you take off the lid, use a spatula around the edge of your pan, and if the soji feels firm enough to lift out, then it's ready. I added the lemon rind while the soji was still on the heat because I wanted the lemon to infuse with the soji. I'm so glad I went with lemon because look at how beautiful this yellow looks on that pink background. Very spring. Also, the combination of a rose, cardamom, and lemon smells so divine. Like, I cannot wait to dip into this. I obviously cut the soji into slices like a cake. Using a non-stick pan is great for this dish because it allows the soji to come out of the pan so easily. You just have to loosen the edges with a spatula and it slips right out. This dish tasted incredible. It's such a warm and comforting meal, and the rose and lemon brought a wonderful freshness to the dish. The perfect combination for spring, in my opinion. I thought I'd miss the crunch of my usual pistachio topping, but I loved the texture and burst of flavor that the lemon rind brought to the soji. I also tried the soji with a drizzle of maple syrup, and it was absolutely delightful. If you like things sweet, I'd definitely recommend that. I really hope you try making soji at home. It really does feel like a hug for your belly and is such a pick-me-up in the morning or at any time of the day, really. Feel free to experiment with whatever flavors you have access to at home and let me know in the comments below how it went. Bye for now.